It's my feel-good breakfast show.
The Knysna seahorse, a seahorse that lives in an estuary. That's the animal that's got our attention for our latest Into the Wild segment, and we're quite excited about this one. And it's for a very good reason, which we'll get to in just a moment with Rio Button, who is a conservation biologist and an Ocean Watch correspondent for Roving Reporters. Rio, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Where's the sea? I thought you would bring a tank with a little seal. Seahorses are without a doubt the cutest creatures on Earth because they are so diminutive and just so delicate and beautiful and lovely. So really excited to get into this particular breed, which is quite different.
Very differently. Because this seahorse lives in an estuary. Why is that so?
Estuaries are just brimming with what Knysna seahorses like to eat. Yeah, so this is zooplankton, and they're basically teeny tiny little plants that float around in the water. And the reason that there's so much zooplankton in the estuary is because the estuary is really calm and sheltered, and there's lots of nutrients, which means that the tiny plants that the zooplankton eat can grow abundantly. And so there's more food for the zooplankton, and there's more zooplankton for the seahorses. So Knysna seahorses, like all seahorses, have these amazing little eyes that can move independently like a chameleon's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they track where the zooplankton's going with their little eyes, and they slurp it up with their straw-like mouth.
I mean, they seem almost magical. They're so whimsical in the way that they look. They seem like fairy tale creatures, and I love the fact that there's so many different species. Is this the only species that doesn't live out to sea?
Yeah, that's right. So
wow.
The Knysna seahorse is the only seahorse that lives exclusively in estuaries, and it's only found in 3 estuaries in the whole world, and they're all on our south coast in a little 70-kilometer strip.
Wow,
So
that's
cool.
precious. Yeah.
You've mentioned a few things, but what is the main difference between a Knysna seahorse and any other seahorses out there?
So the Knysna seahorse, as we said, only lives in these 3 estuaries, and their most common relative is a seagoing seahorse called the yellow seahorse. Yellow seahorses grow to 30 centimeters, while our little Knysna seahorses are only about 12 centimeters.
Aww.
Yeah, and they're specially adapted to live in estuaries because they're much smaller. They've got a much smaller snout, and the coronet, which is basically the spikes on their heads, are much smaller. And scientists think that this makes them better at moving around in the dense aquatic vegetation and seagrass in these estuaries.
So they can kind of bob and weave and get their way around.
Yeah, don't get stuck.
I mean, considering their range and the exclusivity of where we find them, you can understand why they would be endangered. Are there any other threats to them in terms of them being on the, classified as an endangered species?
Their 3 greatest threats are habitat loss from urban expansion and pollution. And yeah, they're just one of 2 endangered species of seahorse in the world. They were the first seahorse to be declared endangered in 2000, and the only other endangered seahorse is Australia's white seahorse.
So we've got to protect them, part of our natural heritage. So many more questions I want to ask about these beautiful, gorgeous little creatures. I know you guys at home are being treated to some amazing pictures as we go. But we are going to continue to focus on this very rare, beautiful little creature that is only found on 3 spots within a 70-kilometer range on our south coast. It's something that is purely South African and something that we need to protect, and I think also explore and educate around. Absolutely beautiful.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
You are still keeping it locked right here on your Feel Good Breakfast Show on S3. Now, earlier on, we spoke to Ocean Watch correspondent for Roving Reporters, Rio Button, about the 2021 Knysna Seahorse Rescue Project. Now, we are continuing the conversation with her right now, so thank you so much for sticking with us this morning.
I don't know why I'm so enamored with these little creatures, but there is something, as I said, like majestic and magical about them, and it kind of makes you want to protect them that much more. And especially when you hear facts that they get stranded a lot. What does that mean? How do they get stranded, and why do they get stranded so often?
Yeah, so the Knysna seahorses in the Swartvlei system face this really unique challenge that other Knysna seahorses in the other estuaries don't, and that's that Swartvlei is not always open to the sea. It's closed to the sea between 3 and 9 months a year. So what happens is annually, Sandparks artificially opens the estuary to the sea, which means the water in the estuary rushes out into the ocean, and this causes the water level in the estuary to drop. And then seahorses that were in the shallows end up getting stranded. And some of them still have their little tails wrapped around the seagrass hanging on tight. But what's really interesting and what I found out while I was doing research, so Sandparks artificially opens the estuary to prevent properties upstream from flooding when there's heavy rain. But if they didn't artificially open it, it would actually be worse and more seahorses would end up getting stranded because Sandparks is allowed to open the estuary when the water level in the estuary reaches 2 meters above sea level. But if it were to open naturally, it would only happen at about 3 meters above sea level because the sandbank between the estuary and the sea is about 3 meters high. So that would lead to an even greater drop. Yeah,
Okay.
so more would end up being stranded.
So it's just one of those things that we have to do, yeah.
Yeah, so it's totally, seal strandings are completely natural, but because they're endangered, we step in.
This means we've got to do something about it.
Yeah.
Speaking about the fact that they are endangered, what is the current population of these seahorses?
So we actually don't know what the Knysna seahorse population is right now. The most recent comprehensive study was done back in 2003, and they estimated that there were about 200,000 adult Knysna seahorses in the wild. But Knysna seahorses are kings of camouflage, and they are so, so difficult to spot. I didn't believe Knysna seahorses occurred in the Swartflare estuary.
Wow.
I spent every Christmas there as a child snorkeling and kayaking, and I never saw a single one until in 2018, Sandparks needed assistance, and as a commercial diver, I assisted them with doing scuba transects, looking for them. And only after 3 days of searching did I see my first.
Find one.
Yeah.
Well, good for them, man.
difficult.
They're tiny, man. They need something. They need something to protect themselves. You're obviously a qualified conservation biologist, but you work with citizen scientists to help rescue the seahorses, a volunteer network that just love nature. Talk us through that relationship and what you guys do.
Yeah, I think it's incredible that average people, anybody who wants to get involved, can get involved hands-on with this project, helping to find these little seahorses and help them to recover and returning them to deeper water. But if you want to help, it's really important that you register as a citizen scientist with Sandparks, because it's actually illegal to handle these seahorses without a permit. Yeah, because they're endangered. And Sandparks does a really great job. They'll notify their citizen scientists that the seahorses will start to strand, and citizen scientists can sign up for when they're available to help. Also, they get issued with permits that allow them to handle seahorses in the specific way for the day.
Which I suppose we need, otherwise seahorses like this, being as rare as they are, going to end up in fish tanks across the globe, which is vital. I've got to ask one last question here, because you just seem so emotionally invested in this. Why this little creature? Why, of all of the conservation subject matter that you would have encountered through your studies, why have these little guys captured your heart?
Oh, they're just incredible. They're just such a strange mix. They've got this, what we call a prehensile tail, which is like a monkey's, that it can hold on to things. They've got the straw-like snout. They've got a pouch like a kangaroo, and these little eyes that move independently. They're just the funniest creatures.
Clearly,
Yeah.
you can see the passion coming through with someone that is so committed to this.
I've fallen in love. I don't want to say I'm exclusively in love with Knysna seahorses. I have a broad love of all seahorses, but the Knysna seahorse is right up there. Thank you, Rio. You're a superstar. Thank you so much for sharing your love and passion and for doing what you do, to you and the rest of your community that are working so hard to protect something that, as I said earlier, is a national treasure because they're only found here. This is something that we really need to take on board, and hopefully this has inspired a new generation of conservationists to think about those hidden gems, those treasures that we can find right here in South Africa and nowhere else.
Certainly a lot learned today. Perhaps Knysna seahorses should get new names like Estuary Horse. Thanks, Rio Button, again once more time for your time this morning.
Cool, thank you.